basically my first semester back, we got called up. So I'd had to withdraw or take a leave of absence from school. With my unit, we got shipped out, went to Iraq, and was there from the in-processing time where you have to go through all the administrative procedures to go until when we came back. It was about a year. It was gone.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Dogen here. And today I'm joined by my new employee who is...
JP.
JP. Okay. So today we're going to do a video where I'm essentially interviewing him such that you guys can get to know him a little bit better as we plan on working together basically for the indefinite future. So I thought you guys would be interested in getting to know that the person that I employed, why I employed them, their history in terms of past occupations, how long they've lived in Japan, etc. First of all, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
Oh, how old am I? Well, we'll say late 40s. I think that's fair. We'll say late 40s. Yeah.
Late 40s. So one of the things that was on my mind when I was trying to hire someone was I really wanted someone capable and skilled. And I didn't know a lot of people in Beppu to begin with. We both used to work at Ritsumeikan Asia Pacific University. And I think of all the people that I knew at that school, JP had the best skill set that aligned with what I was looking for in terms of hiring someone, kind of a complementary skill set. Beyond that skill set, with his age, there's been many, I would say past conversations that we've had where I've thought to myself, oh, this is something like wisdom, like things that I wouldn't have picked up on. And so that's something I've also wanted to bring into my business and just, everyday life, just things to learn from. You're also a father in Japan,
yes,
for example. So there's a lot of things about, like education going through the local school system, that kind of thing that I'll be able to benefit greatly from by having JP working with me essentially. Well, we won't be meeting every day, but we'll be meeting quite often. Let's get started. Now that we've covered kind of your basic age, I thought people would probably be wondering.
Yeah.
Because I think that it's safe to say we look slightly apart in age, although you have much better hair than me. Where you were born, where you grew up, and then maybe spend just like a couple minutes on that, and then you can go up until you graduated from high school.
Okay.
So go ahead.
So I'm originally from Southern California, about an hour outside of Los Angeles, about an hour north. Born and raised there, native Californian. Went to elementary school, middle school, and high school, all in the same city. I'm actually from Ventura, down in Southern California. Yeah.
Were you interested in Japan when you were younger as well, or did that come about later?
So I graduated high school in 1990.
Okay.
And I remember, would have been probably middle school, I think.
Step a little bit more forward.
Okay. So I remember, middle school, I think it was middle school, Robotech was on TV.
Okay.
The original, you probably don't know that one.
No.
That was the whole Mospeda, Macross, kind of a redo.
Okay.
Within the anime fandom, I understand some people don't like it, but, for someone who I had, just basic cable TV, TV, that was the only exposure I would have had to Japan early on. Okay. Really. Other than, textbooks or books in the library.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But you never studied, well, I guess things like anime weren't even close to being mainstream at that time.
No.
So yeah, kind of completely different day and age because a lot of people in my generation kind of became weeaboos like me, so to speak, through things like anime. I was kind of a combination of anime and martial arts, but I guess that was kind of just irrelevant's not the right word, but it wasn't present for your generation.
Pretty much, yeah. I remember, I think the first, other than Robotech, I think the first anime that I really remember seeing, I went to a role-playing game convention. This would have been down in Los Angeles or San Diego. And, like conventions today, there's the vendor room where different shops have tables set up. And there was a table.
Let me scoot back a little bit. Looks like you're peeking a little bit.
Okay. There was a table that So at the convention, there's like there is today at conventions, there's a vendor room. And in the vendor room, there were tables with people, shops, comic shops selling things. And I remember there was a small TV on one table playing some anime from Japan. And it was the first time I really saw it. And I remember seeing the quality of the animation and just the way it looked was it left an impression on me, I'd say.
What role-playing game are you talking about?
Oh man, what did I play? Early days I played AD&D, like first edition, like way back.
Is that Dungeons and Dragons?
Dungeons and Dragons, the original. I played that. Marvel Superheroes had a role-playing game way back in the day.
Interesting.
Palladium. That was a role-playing system, and they had everything from Robotech to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to, all different types of, all different genres within the same role-playing system.
Interesting.
And what was the last one? Star Wars. Played Star Wars quite a bit too with friends.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. The next question that people are going to be asking is, how tall are you? Because I'm 6'1".
I'm too tall to be on stage here.
Too tall to live in Japan.
Yeah, I'm standing with my feet spread apart a little bit, so I can actually be within the frame. 193, 194 centimeters, give or take.
So that's in feet.
6'4", and a little bit.
Yeah. So I already have a little bit trouble as is in Japan with like doors and stuff like that in traditional houses. Yeah. So I can't even imagine what it's like for you. But I mean, to give the long story short, we've both had herniated discs in Japan. So
I threw my back out doing dishes of all things. I did
too, actually. It was the same thing.
Because the sink is so low, I went to grab a glass as I turned, and my back went out, and I collapsed to the floor.
Yeah, mine wasn't as sudden as that. Mine was more like a, and I was like, oh, that. I'm glad we have the sink we do now. It's a lot easier to do dishes. Now that we've covered our various injuries in dealing with being tall in Japan, let's start to get how you got to Japan. So we'll spend a little bit more time on your graduation from high school, the time between then and when you got to Japan.
Okay.
Because I know that's kind of an interesting story for you.
Okay.
It's not like the traditional JET program until later on, right?
Yeah. So, the standard story for everybody is you graduate high school, and then after high school you go to college, and then from college you do JET program job, whatever.
Yeah.
For me, I graduated high school. I tried community college for a little bit. I didn't have the grades or the financial means to actually go into direct to university. But I also, for various personal reasons, just community college wasn't for me. So I dropped out after about a year and worked retail jobs for a little while, had a couple of those. And then I wound up speaking to a recruiter for the Army Reserves. And I asked questions. He answered my questions. It wasn't that classic, high pressure sales or anything.
Yeah.
And I wound up joining the reserves. I mean, I wasn't doing anything with my life. I wasn't going anywhere. And I was interested. So I joined the reserves.
So that's what is the reserves as part of the military at large?
Okay. So within the U.S. military, there's keeping it simple, there's the reserves and there's the National Guard. The reserves are federal part-timers that can kind of backfill the military in times of need. The National Guard is almost identical, almost the same, but the National Guard, and again, I'm trying to keep this simple, the National Guard belongs to the state. So that's why a lot of times when you have disasters, the National Guard is called up because they're a state asset, and they can also be used as law enforcement. This is trivial stuff, but that's why they're often also called up. That's why they're called up in times of riots and peacekeeping and things like that. But the reserve component also can serve active duty if they're called up. So as a member of the reserves. It's the classic 1 weekend a month, and then for 2 or 3 weeks a year, would go somewhere for training. I'd been to, when I was in the reserves, I went to Washington State, saw Rainier up close and personal. That was nice. And a couple weeks in Hawaii. My job in the reserves was I was an executive secretary, so learned about proofreading and handling correspondence, stuff like that. Real exciting Army correspondence. I was in a hospital unit, and then in my 4th year, the Army did a reorganization, and my job was eliminated. So I needed to find a new unit to belong to, and I wound up talking to a National Guard recruiter, and he asked me what I wanted to do, and I told him I had heard about the military's language school in Monterey, California, and I wanted to go there for Japanese. And credit to this recruiter, he said, okay, I'll see what I can find out, but I can't promise you anything. And that was, I think, on a Friday. I had gone back to community college at that point, and he was on campus. He called me, I think, Tuesday or Wednesday. He said he found me a unit that would guarantee they would send me for Japanese. So I wound up transitioning from the reserves to the National Guard. Wound up in a linguist unit based out of Glendale, California, just outside of Los Angeles. And eventually I got sent to, after working for a few more years, had to wait for a slot to open up at the school, but wound up going to the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center in Monterey, California for Japanese.
I think it's very rare that we can hear about people who learn Japanese through the military as opposed to like Genki or YouTube for a lot of the younger generation. What was it like to learn Japanese at that institution? How difficult was it?
It was intense. I mean, it's a full-time job. So you are there in class from 8:30 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. Lunch break. You're studying language.
You're there to study the language.
You are there. That is your job while you're there.
Okay.
The Japanese course at the time was 16 months. I still remember. I think the first day of class was orientation. Or the first day in the classroom was orientation. The second day was, okay, class, this is katakana, start to finish. Tomorrow there will be a test. Second day of class, we took the test, and they said, okay, thank you for the test. We'll go grade these. This is hiragana. Tomorrow there will be a test.
So a little bit more,
it was
slightly more intense than what you would see in like a public high school.
It was very fast-paced. By the third day, we were starting to touch on kanji and grammar basics. Most of my class rates, I had taken 2 semesters of Japanese at community college. That covered about the first 4 weeks of the class, I would say. Most of my classmates had never had any Japanese at all. By the end of the course, you can skim, read a newspaper. You go from 0 to newspaper in that time.
That's intense.
Basically, you come out somewhere between, I would say, and you could graduate with like a high N3, but you basically you're N2, N1 by the time you finish.
Okay. Wow.
After 16 months.
And is there more of an emphasis on like speaking or writing or reading in that course, or is it kind of all-rounded?
All-rounded, all 3.
Okay.
And the tests you take to qualify and to graduate actually grade you on the 3 different aspects: speaking, reading, writing, or speaking, reading, and listening are the 3 main. There's not so much writing.
That's interesting. Yeah, one of the things that I've always said that I personally don't like too much about the JLPT is that there's not a speaking section. And that's obviously my whole spiel on Patreon and stuff like that.
Speaking it's an important part of communication.
Yeah. It's like if it's speaking in my eyes is like that's like the bones of the language. Well, acquiring a language, so to speak. From learning Japanese and graduating from that institution, then how did you later end up in Japan?
So after that, I graduated. So graduated high school in 90, graduated from the language school in 2000. So it took me 10 years to get to there.
So odd jobs, military, here and there, back to community college a little bit.
Language school.
Then the language school.
And then after the language school, I then transferred to San Francisco State University. Hey, Gators.
Did the military subsidize your tuition?
I had GI Bill at the time. It was a little bit, but I mean, being a California resident at a state school, tuition was pretty. It was.
Back then it wasn't.
It was. I think it was about $1,000 a semester, maybe. For everything.
Wow.
Yeah. So
different times.
Yeah, it's a little bit more now, and I mean that was only 20 years ago. So I show up there, did my first year. I applied for study abroad. I went to Kyoto University of Foreign Studies, Kyoto Gaidai, for a year study abroad.
And that was your first time coming to Japan?
Basically, yeah. When I was in language school, Yeah, first long time. When I was in the language school, I came for a 1-week break, and afterwards I came on a 2-3 week mission with the National Guard. So, yeah, but my first long haul in Japan was study abroad, 1 year.
Okay, and that was 2000.
That was 2001, 2002.
Okay.
I arrived just before 9/11. Like I was in my first or second week, and I was hanging out with a now friend in his room, and we were watching TV, and we were trying to figure out what this strange movie was, and they realized it wasn't a movie.
Oh, so you were in Japan.
Yes, I had just arrived in Japan. I was still in the National Guard at the time. So the next morning, I went down to a payphone, and I called my unit to see if I needed to get on a plane back to the States.
Right.
And they said, no, you're good. Stay there. So, did my year study abroad. But yeah, it was, the U.S. was kind of different. I would compare it to, I don't know what I would compare it to. To use a more current analog, before and after Corona.
Oh, okay.
It was that kind of difference for somebody coming from outside.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
Yeah, it was really different. I came back, and again, I was still in the Guard. Came back, and basically my first semester back, we got called up. So I'd had to withdraw or take a leave of absence from school. With my unit, we got shipped out, went to Iraq, and was there from the in-processing time where you have to go through all the administrative procedures to go until when we came back. It was about a year. It was gone. It was, I didn't see combat per se, but, it was...
What kind of things did you do during that year?
Reports, gathered information, analyzed it, wrote reports.
So intel?
Yeah, being in a language position, that's part of the intelligence branch. So we did a lot of intelligence related stuff, a lot of writing, a lot of interviews, a lot of reporting. So stuff like that, and then came back from that, went back to school, finished up a semester later, had almost all my credits done, finished up a semester later. Applied to the JET program, was accepted, and came to Japan in 2005. On the JET program, I was placed in Kagoshima, out in the mountains in Kagoshima, in a small community. It was two small towns had merged, and after the merge, they had 12,000 people.
Wow.
I went down. I still have connections down there. I went down just before Corona to visit friends, and found out that town now has 9,000 people.
Yeah, that's Japan right now.
15 years, they lost 25% of their population. Onsen everywhere.
Kind of like Beppu, where we live now.
Yeah. The small town had, I think, 30, 35 onsen in it, in just this small town.
And was how, I would say, in proximity to not Sakurajima, Kagoshima-shi.
Yeah.
Like where was it in relation to that, rather?
About a little more than an hour away by car.
Which direction?
To the north.
To the north.
Yeah,
okay.
to the north. Yeah. So in Kagoshima you have the Satsuma Hanto and the Osumi Hanto, and then they come together. And I was in the area to the north, up above.
So you were north of the mountain, the volcano, Sakurajima?
Yeah, that's in the bay between the two peninsulas.
Right. Okay.
So, north of there. Shinmoedake, I think, is one of the volcanoes that's erupted a few times in the last few years. Kind of close to there.
Oh, okay.
That part of Kagoshima.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And how long were you on the JET program for?
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year. Yeah. I had reasons to go back. I went back, and about a year and a half later, I returned to Japan. On the JET program, coming from America, you usually come in August or September. And then they ask you at some point if you want to recontract. Remember that?
Yes.
And the recontracting is around December, they ask you.
It changed
really early.
later on for us, the later generation.
Yeah.
You have 3 years to begin with.
Okay, yeah. So for personal reasons, I wanted to go back, and it was still early. It was in December when they asked, "Do you want to recontract?" And I said, "No, I've got personal, family, friends reasons that I want to go back." But between then and when I got back, my life situation had changed, and so I went back. I worked in presentations for an investment bank for about a year and a half, and then
In Japan?
This was in San Francisco.
Oh,
actually.
okay. When you were back in the States.
Yeah, when I was back in the States. And I started to realize that the JET program is life in Japan, but it's not real life in Japan. There's still a lot of hand-holding. It's not real life.
Yeah.
It is life in Japan, but
there
it's
is
different.
a lot of hand-holding. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and I realized I really wanted to try life in Japan. So I...
Do you mind if I stop you real quick?
Go for it.
Okay, so there's one point I'd like to briefly make here, which is that one of the things that I've observed a lot in Japan is, and this has happened to me as well, and basically everyone I know that comes to Japan is after you start living in Japan for any amount of time, you start to see things that are different from your own country and the negative things that you didn't anticipate beforehand. And if you have things in your personal life that kind of add to that, then that can kind of stress the wanting to go back to the States or go back to wherever you're from. But the point that I'm trying to get to is that there's a lot of people that are in Japan and see all these things that are wrong with Japan. And all these things certainly may be wrong with Japan. But oftentimes that same individual will go back to the States or go back to wherever they're from and start seeing the things that they didn't notice before about their own country.
Reverse culture shock.
Yeah, reverse
culture shock. Yeah.
Culture shock. And so there's like an entirely other demographic of people that they go back to the States and then they come back to Japan again, and you fall into that category.
A little bit. I think I actually benefited from. So when I came to Japan on the JET program, I would have been. 2005. So I was in my early 30s.
Okay.
I'd already worked. I'd been working in the U.S. for, more than a decade, and a lot of the complaints that I see, younger people that come straight out of university and come to Japan, a lot of the complaints I hear from them about workplace or life in Japan or the way things are, the frustration with the banks or the post office, stuff like that. That's not Japan. That's
the
life.
World. Yeah.
That's life.
And it's just the first thing that they encounter after graduating.
Because they came from they graduated, they came over on the JET program or some other, and this is their first time not having the bubble of university or home and I think another part of it is when you're in your home country, you still have that insulation of the culture that you're used to. So things are the way that you're accustomed to.
Yeah.
So you don't notice
for right and for wrong.
Yeah. So you don't notice the corners and barbs and edges and all of that of, when things just don't make sense. I had gone through that. I'd gone through the working world. So when I came to Japan, I had frustrations, but I thought this is not a Japan frustration. This is just a standard workplace frustration with a slightly different flavor. I think that has helped me over the years.
Yeah. I think the best example of this phenomenon that we've talked about in the past is many people, they come to Japan maybe on the JET program or whatever it is, and then they have a terrible boss. And again, for some reason, they come to maybe unconsciously, subconsciously think that this is more of a Japan problem, whereas like jerk bosses are a universal thing across the board.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay, moving on. After you came back to Japan, what were you doing?
So, this is another fun one. So I came to Japan that would have been 2008.
And how did you get your visa?
So I came to Tokyo and
on a tourist visa.
And I spoke with some recruiters and got introduced to some companies and wound up got an offer. So
you're talking about headhunters, company recruiters, not military recruiters.
No, just regular company recruiters. Yeah, I was after my experience of going to Iraq. Once I finished my contract, I was done. I served my part. I played my role. Yeah, so I wound up in IT. I was at a U.S. investment bank in Tokyo. And
are you comfortable dropping the name?
Probably shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
A major one.
Yeah, a major one. And I did IT desktop support there. The problem is, it was 2008.
Yeah.
And about 9 months later.
Foreshadowing.
Yeah, about 9 months later. So I came to Japan just before 9/11. I came to Japan just before the whole financial housing crisis,
Lehman shock.
the Lehman shock.
Yeah.
And of course, I was working in an investment bank, so made it till the third round of layoffs when they let all contractors, and I was a contractor, let everybody go. At that time, I was married. And my wife was pregnant, and I found myself in Tokyo without a job at the start of a growing financial crisis, global financial crisis. Through one of my friends, I got an introduction to a small Japanese IT firm and wound up working there for the next 2 years until 3/11, the Tohoku earthquake and tsunami and all that.
Yeah.
I was in Tokyo for that. I was on my way to work when it hit. I was in the Ginza line when it hit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you could feel it as the train was going, or was it stopped?
The train was stopped at a station.
Okay.
Had my iPod on, earbuds in, and I'm looking down, and when the train stops, there's that rocking motion as people get on and off the train.
Yeah.
You've experienced that. So I'm just looking down. It was 2:00. It's early afternoon. I'd taken the morning off to take care of our son who was sick, and I'm looking down, and the train car is shaking as people are getting on and off. And it's still shaking, and it's still shaking. And I'm like, this is weird. And I look up, and nobody is moving. And the Japanese guy, older Japanese guy next to me looks at me, and he goes, earthquake. Yeah, so after that, my wife wanted to get out of Tokyo for
It makes sense.
various reasons. And through another friend, I was introduced to APU and wound up with a job at APU, and I've been here since 2011.
We both worked at APU. There was an overlap of time of about 3.5 years. I was on contract there for 5 years, but for a year and a half, the year and a half at the end, I was basically on parental leave because my twin daughters were born. So I was never in the office for that entire year and a half. But we spent 3.5 years working together.
Yeah.
And you had been there, I would say, a prior, 6 years? 5?
Little less, about 5, I think.
Okay,
Yeah,
and then like an additional year and a half.
Yeah,
ish.
you came to 16, 15?
Ish,
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So what was working at APU like for you?
I liked it. I mean, it was when we came down, I needed a job.
Okay. First of all, just 30-second real quick introduction. APU, Ditsumeikon Asia Pacific University.
Yes.
Ditsumeikon University is one of the major universities in Japan. It's kind of like, what would you say the U.S. equivalent is? I don't know, maybe like Berkeley or something like that.
Yeah, I mean it's one of the
Although it's a private school.
It's one of the top private universities in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Ditsumeikon University, but that's kind of a more traditional university. It's overwhelmingly Japanese students. Yeah. But APU is like a branch of that university, and half of the students that go to APU are Japanese and half are non-Japanese. And the non-Japanese students are also there for the full 4 years. It's not like a study abroad. You can study abroad at APU, but it's a super international environment. I would say about half of the staff as well. Maybe not quite half.
Not even.
Oh, it's the faculty. The faculty. Half of the faculty.
So APU it's got 2 colleges, about 6,000 students, basically 50-50, give or take a little bit, international, domestic. International students come from, I think there's 90 countries represented on campus right now. It's a wonderful environment. Students come to the university. It's a Japanese university, but they come on either an English or a Japanese track. So if you're coming from the U.S., Canada, Brazil, India, you're generally coming on the English track. If you're a Japanese, you're generally coming on the Japanese track. The first thing you do is you study the opposite language.
Yeah.
So to be bilingual at APU is nothing. There's so many students that are trilingual. I've known students that speak 6, 7, 8 languages. It's the environment is something else. It's a great environment.
I agree. I've made a little bit of videos in the past about APU, and I also agree that the environment is like spectacular. I really didn't like working there because I tend to do much better with creative stuff, and I was doing sales at APU. But I would like to kind of re-emphasize that I agree with everything that JP just said, that the environment is really kind of like almost like magical. I graduated from the University of Washington, public state school in the United States.
Yeah.
So I was there for 3 years. And then I was in Keio University for one of the years when I was enrolled at University of Washington. So I've seen the kind of traditional U.S. side. I've seen the traditional Japanese side. And APU is like, it's not even not in between. It's like this whole other thing entirely. So
It is its own creature. It really is.
Yeah. So what kind of work did you do at APU? I did sales. I would recruit Japanese students from mostly international schools in Japan, but also Southeast Asia, and say, look at this unique school. Or if you're interested in coming, you might have a great time. That's what I did at my time at APU.
Yeah.
But what did you do?
Yeah, so you were in the admissions office on the domestic side. For my first 5 years, almost 5 years, I was in the student office, and I did student support. I did mostly translation, interpretation, because even though international students are coming to, one of the first things they do is learn the language. It's not a language school, but one of the first things they do is they learn the language. In their first year, second year, sometimes even third year, they're not quite there with being able to describe problems or understand problems with, issues with their scholarship application. And so I handled all of that student support, interpretation, and translation. And that's one of the things that made for a really great experience for me, is because I can imagine. I got to know all of the students, all of the international students.
Yeah, that might have also been one of the reasons that I didn't like working there so much, because it was nonstop sales. I would never get to the point where I had like a strong connection with the student. It would be like the student applied and the student has now registered at APU. Okay, move on to the next one,
Yeah.
I did get to meet many really cool students that were there during that same time that I was there.
Yeah.
And I think, they were all like great, amazing individuals as well. But nowhere near the kind of connections that you must have made.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And even so, that was my first 5 years. The second 5 years, I moved up to the office of the president, and I worked on PR, social media, developed a social media team where we worked with other offices, mostly the admissions office, but also worked with some other offices to develop our social media presence. I can't really say that it was me doing it, but I think I helped enable the team that enabled us to really represent the university on social media. They still do really good work on Instagram. I'll give them props for that.
We used to, eat lunch a lot together, even though we were in different offices, because there is the faculty, so the teachers at APU. There is the staff, so the people that do things like, non-teaching jobs at APU. So again, dealing with the students that are already there, but not teaching them, like helping them with problems.
The office work, pretty much.
Yeah, the office work.
And administrative work.
Yeah, office and administration, administrative work is what we did. So among that staff, again, half the students and half of the teachers are both Japanese and international, but the staff itself is much less mixed.
Yeah, closer to 10% or so.
Yeah. So the group of staff members there that are non-Japanese is rather small. So we got to know each other pretty well there, along with, I would say maybe like, 25, 26, 30-ish other foreigners that we still really see all the time around Beppu. Beppu is a small city, so you run into everyone everywhere.
Exactly,
I started doing YouTube, I want to say a year after I began working at APU. As most of you guys probably know, I was doing writing beforehand, and I kind of had to put my artistic endeavors on the back burner for a little while because I needed to get competent at my work at APU. But then after that, I had a conversation with my boss. I said, I want to kind of start doing more creative stuff. I'm going to start doing stuff with YouTube and with like my old writing. And he said, yeah, that's totally fine. During kind of like your last year-ish at APU.
Yeah, last year or so, yeah.
I kind of had you helping me edit some of the Patreon lessons. Then I would obviously go check the edit and give feedback, and then we would work together to kind of smooth out the process. And you just quit APU, I would say 2 weeks ago at this point, a week and a half ago.
Yeah, real recent, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe what we can do for this final 10 minutes
is
actually kind of talk about briefly about kind of the things that we would like to do going forward with this channel and the other channels.
Sounds good.
Without doing any big reveals.
Yeah.
Basically, I'm going to offload a lot of the work from my Patreon series onto JP such that I can concentrate more on comedy. And again, get to the point where hopefully within the next 3 or 4 weeks or so, where I can do at least a comedic video each week.
That's the goal.
Yeah, and that might, I think we can probably get close to that over the next month, maybe 2 months. But then after that, my twin daughters are going to start going to school. So we will certainly be able to hit that goal once that happens. I think, we're just about out of time at this point. So I got to wrap things up. But hopefully you guys enjoyed getting to know JP a little bit more. I think there's probably, again, a fair number of people that maybe they were in the military or they heard things about your story that were different from the normal person's story. And because of that, they would like to ask you a question directly. So maybe what we'll do is we'll leave either an email address or a Twitter account or some kind of contact below such that people that would like to can ask you directly.
Yeah, or even they could leave questions in the comments. That might work too.
I've given JP access to some of the YouTube features, so he'll be able to reply, and maybe he'll just say, JP after. Yeah,
we'll take care of that. We'll cover that. Yeah.
Again, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I'm rambling at this point, but thank you again for your support, and I'll talk to all you guys again soon. Sayonara.
See you, Internet. Talk to you soon.